We are joined now by Steve Bannon, of course, former top official in the Trump administration, filmmaker, radio host, website founder, president, and so many other things. Steve, great to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Why is this film so important to see?
The simple reason it puts before the people the case for the Trump program and the forces that are arrayed against Trump, everything from the radical Democratic Party on the left, the opposition party media, and the Republican establishment, in addition to Iran, ISIS, China, North Korea. I mean, this is a guy that, laid out to the American people a very coherent program, and he has had to fight tooth and nail the Republican establishment, the media, and now, members of a coup inside of his administration. And so it's nothing less than a heroic, I think, film that every person ought to see, and particularly the deplorables and the Reagan Democrats that voted for Trump in 2016. If you want your vote to count in 2016, what you've seen is this process to nullify the 2016 election, what I call the nullification project. And it's incumbent upon everybody that supports Trump, I think, not just to see this film, but to get out there and vote on November 6th.
Let's talk about what you described as basically a slow-rolling coup unfolding in the Trump administration.
No. That's Sean Hannity. By the way, I want to differ, Laura, for a second. Our dear friend and your colleague, Sean Hannity, who I think is one of the best guys in media next to Laura Ingraham, he calls it a slow-rolling coup. There's nothing slow-rolling about it. Look at the polls out today at CNN, where President Trump, I think, dropped 10 points among independents. This coup has been timed. This is very sophisticated, and this is a blitzkrieg. It's not slow rolling at all. They have been plotting this for a while, and they finally struck. And they knew what they saw happening was that President Trump was starting to get on the message of this, a referendum on his entire program. It was starting to tighten. To look like less than 20 seats would be lost. That would keep the Republicans in the majority, and they struck. Right, and when they struck, you can start to see some of the independents who don't keep up with the news that closely, believing what's in Bob Woodward's book, believing what's in this editorial, and that's why I think that I've told the president, I said to people around him, he must act, and I think act quickly to get in back of who actually did this, to expose them and to fire them.
Well, if it's one person, but it's not one person, if it's a blitzkrieg. Finding out who wrote an op-ed clearly was assisted by some editor at the New York Times. But if it's a blitzkrieg, that's just a little nick against the resistance, is it not?
Well, I think that what they're doing is targeting him. I think he's got to go back. No, but first things first. I think what you've got to do is you got to shut this down. And the reason you've got to shut it down is that they're going to have other traps laid for President Trump. One of the things you can is that give you a specific example. Remember a couple of weeks ago they said that President Trump had come out and said that there was going to be no pay raises for federal government employees. It turns out inside the administration, nobody actually knows how that order was given. Right? People are searching right now how that happened without the president authorizing it. These people inside this coup, I think, have spring-loaded a number of traps like this. And that's why, to me, it's got to be exposed, and you got to do it. You got to do it quickly and get to the bottom of it. These people have, they talk about they're patriots, and they talk about President Trump as dangerous. This is virtually, unheard of in American history. It's only really happened once, leaving Nixon and Kennedy and all that stuff aside that people still argue about. We know for a fact this happened with George McClellan and the Democratic generals of the Union Army versus Abraham Lincoln, the summer of 1862. And President Lincoln acted quickly. He fired McClellan. He fired, I think, 5 corps commanders, and he took care of it. I think that's what has to happen here. This election is going to set the direction of the country because the opposition is looking to shut down the entire Trump program by impeaching him in the House. That's why the House is everything. The House must be held, and it must be held by Republicans. Even people out there in the audience are going to know a bunch of rhinos in their districts. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to vote sometimes for people that you don't exactly.
I think we just lost Steve Bannon. We'll make sure we reconnect with him. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Donald Trump's approval numbers have dropped 6 points in the CNN poll. He was up at 42%. Now he's down at 36%. Critical numbers that you need to watch are the independents in suburbs who are moving toward Democrats. It's easy to sort of, dismiss all this. It doesn't matter. But it's not great. And it means that the president has to stay relentlessly focused on what he's doing for the American people, relentlessly focused on the people, and point out those who seek to divide us. I think it's critical that President Trump go into these areas of the country that are not only his bread and butter, people who turned out to vote for him, but in initiatives that appeal to those independent voters who are just looking for pragmatic policies. I said this early this year, in January and December. I said, the voters want things to calm down. They don't want the constant, the frenzy, the frenetic reactions, the up and down. And of course, the incoming is meant to get Trump off his game. And I think that's what Steve is talking about here. The blitzkrieg is meant to get you off balance. And we know what the left is capable of doing. The question is, what is the Trump administration capable of doing to, I think, calm people down? And so people looking at this White House think, boy, if we lose this Republican majority, we're going to be looking at an economic downturn. We're going to be looking at years of investigations, and this Trump agenda is going to be shelved. We're back with Steve Bannon here on the Laura Ingraham Show. Steve, we were just talking about Trump's numbers have really dropped precipitously. You're right, among independents, suburban women. You know, we had married women turn out for him in significant numbers in the election, and now his numbers are down. And I want to ask you this question, Steve. What can the administration do besides, rooting out who the anonymous column writer is, to keep the focus on the American people, relentlessly on the people, on the women, on the independent voters, the blue collars, and not get sidetracked by Mueller and all these other things? What can Trump do? What would you advise them to do?
I think, look, it's a difference between the signal and the noise. The noise is all the Mueller stuff. I think the signal is continue to do what you're doing on these economic deals. Continue to engage in the economic war against China. Look at the math. The underlying math on the economy is unbelievable. Nobody could have predicted. Even people that were Trump supporters could have never predicted that his economic nationalism would have driven the economy in the positive direction. It's driven it, and this America First foreign policy would start to kick in against places like Iran and Turkey and North Korea. So I think it's continue to hammer. What he's got to do now, I think, is to get on the campaign trail and go back out, because he's the best salesman for his own program. He's also the best closer. This is the same thing as like in the 2016 campaign. He's the best closer in history. Just get on the road and make your case to the people. I also don't think this is a persuasion election, Laura. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a lot of time to go out and try to get, some of these voters he's lost, particularly some of the female voters. I think that just is what it is. This is a base election, what I call base plus. It's deplorables plus the Reagan Democrats and this conservative base. If you get that, if you go through these.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. Is it his connection, James, or don't you? We're just getting the key information here, and we're losing Steve. It's just ridiculous. I don't know if you Stevie there. No, okay. So we'll try to get him back one more time. It's very frustrating, but this is live radio. This is the kind of stuff that happens. But it happens mostly to our show for some reason. I don't get it.